the Melissa J Show. My name's Melissa J, and we are coming to you live in front of our studio audience here in scenic North Hollywood, California. Well, that's actually not a studio audience you just heard. Those are just the voices in my head, whom I am very popular with, I might add. And speaking about being popular, I should probably introduce my adorable little co-host here. This is Melissa J. Jr., who is also the lead photographer here at the Melissa J. Show. And yes, it is cocktail hour here in North Hollywood, so I am enjoying a time-honored Los Angeles tradition, getting my dog drunk. And in case you're wondering about all the pills in front of her, well, apparently everyone is doing them these days. And we here at this show like to be in style. So Junior is currently being prescribed by 4 different physicians, also known as veterinarians. And I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to have a little math lesson while we counted out her Xanax. So we are enjoying yet another time-honored Los Angeles tradition, using drugs to teach math. And for the record, I'm actually 100% sober these days. I am drinking non-alcoholic alcohol while she is drinking alcohol, and plenty of it. And in case you're wondering why I'm sober, it's because I am way too high on myself to lower myself into substance abuse. But my little co-host here is living life in the fast lane because this is LA and one of us has to. So we have a glorious train wreck to look forward to in the upcoming weeks. But in the meantime, let's get to the news. Starting out the show with news out of Florida and the recent controversy over some high school yearbook photos. Apparently, dozens of the girls had their photos digitally altered to remove any cleavage or side boob that was visible to the camera. And the backlash against this has been fierce. Maybe a little too fierce. Does anybody else think it's weird that this story has gotten more coverage than, some of the mass shootings that happened over the same weekend? I can't imagine losing a loved one to senseless gun violence only to see their deaths getting less coverage than this yearbook story. Their deaths are getting less coverage than those girls' boobs did in those photos. And again, I'm on the girls' side 100%, but the bottom line is that watching a major news network staunchly demanding to see the breasts of underage girls is just not a good look. But it is a serious problem though. Look at what they did to Melissa J. Jr.'s yearbook photo. I know, it is an issue that needs to be addressed, but maybe she should keep some clothes on after her recent sexual encounter with Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, who has also been in the news lately for going on a speaking tour with Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, where the two will be sharing a stage, sharing travel and lodging accommodations, as well as sharing their mutual feelings about Donald Trump and the future of America. And we all know where this is going. Those two are totally going to hook up. I mean, come on. She likes to have tantric sex for hours, and he likes cocaine. You put those two in the same hotel together? How is that not going to happen? And before we go any further, I have a message from the legal department here at the Melissa J Show. You cannot sue me for putting the image of those two having sex in your head. And trust me, it is just as disturbing to me as it is to you. In fact, here's a picture that Melissa J. Jr. took of me rehearsing that joke before the show. And in case you're wondering why I'm pretending to get drunk with my dog, it's because we have to live in a world where that hookup is taking place. And on a programming note, I realize this is the 3rd episode in a row where I have made jokes about Congressman Matt Gaetz. And I also realize that on previous episodes I have stated that the more you fixate on somebody, the more repressed sexual fantasies you have about them, except in this case. I do not have any sexual fantasies about Matt Gaetz. This is the one and only exception to that rule because the rules don't apply to me. In other sexual misconduct news, in response to the overwhelming amount of allegations against several of its inductees, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announced it will be changing its name to, you guessed it, the Sexual Misconduct Hall of Fame. And from now on, the members of Led Zeppelin will only be allowed to tell stories about women adding layers of clothing during their concerts. And speaking of Led Zeppelin, they also announced a reunion tour scheduled for this summer, and the opening act for that tour will be none other than, you guessed it, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And hotel partying will never be the same. And speaking of Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'd like to respond to a recent incident where she put a poster on the door of her office in the House of Representatives that said, and I quote, "There are two genders, male and female, trust the science." Science. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now the poster girl for science. Are you kidding me? This is the same person who, rather than accept climate change, claims that the campfire of 2018 was started by a laser from outer space, and she also supports a conspiracy theory about Hillary Clinton eating someone's face that's called frazzle drip. Now, just to set the record straight, here's a picture that Melissa J. Jr. took of what that sign on her office actually said. Anyone who claims to be a person of science cannot support anything that's called frazzle drip. Sounds like a great name for a sexual lubricant, horrible name for any binding social theory. But since we're so boisterously accepting science these days, let me introduce you to a scientist by the name of Dr. Sigmund Freud, who stated many times that androgyny is one of the most heightened levels of consciousness that a person could achieve. And he would often prescribe cross-dressing to his patients as a form of therapy to help make them better people. So you're not the only one trusting the science. And since you're also so boisterously touting your patriotism all the time, perhaps you could refrain from wiping your ass with the First Amendment when it comes to transgenders. Because in the First Amendment, it clearly states that you do you and I'll do me, also known as America. And finally tonight, on a bit of a serious note, I'd like to take a moment to talk to transgenders and address the overwhelming amount of BS that has been thrown at us lately. It seems like every week there's a new celebrity speaking out against us, or yet another politician using us as political pawns to rile up an angry group of voters. And somehow, we've been turned into one of America's punching bags, and it's been nauseating to watch. Especially when it comes to the issue of high school sports. Now, I understand this is a very complicated issue with a lot of different perspectives, and all of them need to be considered, especially the perspective of the women who have been competing in these events and putting their heart and souls into them. Everyone that's directly involved should have a voice here. But considering how empty the bleachers are at the majority of these events, there sure is an awful lot of abusive outrage over this issue, and considering how most of it is coming from the same folks who have consistently voted to slash funding from public schools and systematically defunded the same sporting programs that they are now so hell-bent on quote-unquote protecting. It's occurred to me that the majority of this outrage has nothing to do with high school sports. It's about using politics as an umbrella to express hatred towards transgenders, which has become a disturbing trend in this country as of late. And speaking from my own experience, the world of stand-up comedy has been no different. There have been many times over the last few years when I have seen the art form of comedy being used as a smokescreen to mainstream and legitimize anti-transgender views. And I'm not talking about good-natured comics making a joke here and there. I have absolutely no problem with that. And no matter what gets said, I do not support censorship of anyone, and I can't emphasize that enough. But considering the amount of danger that the average transgender faces on a daily basis, I do have to say that it's been heartbreaking watching the people at the top of the game using their platforms to cheerlead millions of anonymous people into having strong and negative opinions towards us that have nothing to do with comedy. And there's been a ripple effect all throughout the industry. I know at the open mic level here in Los Angeles, there have been many times when I've had to sit in crowds and watch comics get on stage and threaten to stab me, tell me I belong in a zoo, and call me every name in the book. But no matter what, I keep showing up. And no matter how bad things have gotten, I have never been in favor of canceling anyone. Because as pro-LGBT as I am, sodomizing the First Amendment is not on the agenda. I know that for me in my own life, the only solution to all this BS that we're facing has been to use free speech to defend and define myself, which is exactly what I'm trying to do with this show. Boycotts and cancellations are not the answer because presence speaks louder than absence. So whatever you're doing with your life right now is the time to give it everything you got and be the best that you can be. Because when you do that, you tell the world who you are and not the other way around. And when you do that for yourself, it's a beautiful thing. I can guarantee it. And now it's time for a segment that we call Melissa J. Kisses Her Own Ass. I've had to sit in crowds and watch comics get on stage and threaten to stab me, tell me I belong in a zoo, and call me every name in the book. But no matter what, I keep showing up. I am way too high on myself to lower myself into substance abuse. Because the rules don't apply to me, whom I am very popular with, I might add. I invented the internet. Hey, look, it's a comedy show. I'm not trying to take myself too seriously. But before we get out of here, I just want to say one thing, and this is very important to me. It's the one thing that gets me out of bed every morning, and it's the whole point that I'm trying to make with this show, is that if you're transgender, you hold your head high and be proud of who you are no matter what. There are brighter days ahead for all of us. And to everyone watching at home, thank you for your time. Please subscribe to our channel because me and my dog are here to stay. So stay tuned.